terms of Africa and saying, these were commodity booms, but it's not completely true in Latin America. It's said that in the press, that these are commodity booms, now they're busting, now they're all going to go to hell, and which they, of course, deserve for violating neoliberal principles. And you see this every day in the press. The press in Argentina is fantastic. I mean, I think they would be a little more humble after getting the first 4 years of that economic recovery completely wrong, and saying it was not going to recover. But here they are, trying to say that everything is falling apart. The last quarter growth in Argentina was 4.5%. That's not exactly terrible. I mean, South Korea fell by over 25, I think, and other countries that press favors much more have been doing quite terribly. Obviously, the United States is free fall. In Latin America, sure, they're going to get hit by the crisis, but they're getting hit a lot later and a lot less than other regions. So, what are the possibilities then going forward? Just to and here I'm kind of optimistic, even though obviously this is a terrible world recession, as Liana pointed out at the beginning. But some dogmas are disappearing. Here in the United States, for example, not only has we spent how many years under the Clinton administration where they actually said that, looking at this is the liberals too, they said we have a $5.4 trillion projected budget surplus over the next decade, and we are not going to increase any social spending whatsoever until we pay off the entire national debt. Okay, that was not so long ago. It seems like ancient history now. Now, that has gone out the window, right? The deficit is now, projected at 12.3% of GDP. It's just twice the size of the biggest deficit that we've had in the post-World War II period.
Yeah, actually, where are all the monetaries? I mean, no one came out fighting, huh?
They're all Keynesians now.
Yeah,
and actually,
amazing.
but not enough, really, because the stimulus package, as you know, is not really enough. The only country the biggest stimulus package is China. It's not even clear that theirs will be enough relative to GDP. It's much bigger than ours. But ours is not going to be enough. They're going to have a second one. So they are still fighting, but they're fighting on a different terrain, I think, than you fought just a few years ago. And another part of it, in terms of monetarism, I mean, we've financed about 1.2 trillion of the increase in the debt was monetized. It was money creation through the Fed, something that would have caused a huge storm done very quietly right now. And so why? Well, inflation is obviously not a threat right now. And is this temporary? I don't think it's completely temporary. I think that obviously there will be a huge surge of right-wing ideology coming back after when the economic recovery starts. They're going to want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and everything else. But certain things have changed. So I think that helps. You see this in Latin America too. There are stimulus packages in many countries right now. They're not sufficient, but they're a lot of them are going in the right direction. Again, not everywhere. But you have certain institutional obstacles. One of them is still the IMF. You might think from seeing the IMF and they're calling for a 2% of GDP global fiscal stimulus, I think is reasonable, or at least it's a good start. But on the other hand, when they're actually involved in negotiating loans in Eastern Europe and Pakistan and El Salvador, they have a lot of pro-cyclical, what economists call pro-cyclical policy. That is, policies of cutting budget, cutting fiscal deficits, and aggressive inflation targeting, the same kind of things that they imposed in the past. Now that gets to another point, I think, which Liana raised in the beginning. What is the purpose of the lending to developing countries right now? I think the main purpose of it is to provide a foreign exchange, so that if they want to pursue expansionary fiscal policies and monetary policies, and their economies continue to grow through this recession, that they don't run into balance of payments problems. In other words, the main difference between a typical developing country and the United States in terms of the ability to pursue the correct, expansionary policies in a downturn, is that we, and to a lesser extent Europe and Japan, have a hard currency. We have the key reserve currency for the world, so we can do whatever we want. But even Europe and Japan, they have hard currencies, and the developing countries don't. If they do have enough, like China has 1.9 trillion in reserves, or Bolivia, which has more reserves than China does relative to their economy right now, they can expand as much as they want on the domestic side. And she's not telling me to shut up, she's telling me how much time I have left, which I appreciate.
He has 2 more minutes, and then he has to shut up.
So, and that's all I really need. The whole purpose of it, so what the purpose of this lending should be is to enable more countries who would otherwise have to, because you can't run out of reserves, right? I mean, you can't let them get too low. So to enable countries to pursue the kind of expansionary policies that we're pursuing in the United States. And so to the extent that the IMF is, embedded in this neoliberal ideology still, they can still do harm. And although the world definitely needs the resources, so I think that's going to be a struggle. And the IMF and these other institutions, the World Bank included, are also, as the economy recovers, they're going to not only go back to more conservative fiscal and monetary policy, but they're going to continue to have kind of anti-development policies. That is, to try and prevent the kind of policies that Ha-Joon talks about in all of his books that were successful in the past. So this is a problem. Another problem, I think, and this is even a more difficult one, is that after 25, 30 years of neoliberalism, you don't have the capacity in a lot of countries. Half countries in Latin America, governments, these are good governments. These are governments, democratic governments, that want to change policy, and they just don't have the capacity to do so, because it's been so long since even Latin America had real industrial policy or development policy. And so this has to be overcome, and maybe Ha-Joon can write his next book on how governments can do this. One last point, and that is, in terms of what can governments do during a recession, like this, in order to still move along the path of industrial and real development. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the best example is China in the 1998 Asian crisis, where they changed a strategy from an export-led policy to a huge infrastructure program. And I think everyone agrees, not only did it succeed, I mean, you look at all the other countries, in the region, except for Vietnam also, they all just dropped, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand. They all crashed, and had this terrible recession or depression. And China kept growing very close to its double-digit rates throughout the period. And I think the other part of it is that this infrastructure and other public investment, and you got to remember, state-owned enterprises are still account for about 20% of GDP in just their investment, okay, which is huge. They were able to prepare the ground for the next decade of extremely high growth. And so I think to the extent that countries can do this now, we can have still some development successes. Okay, thank you.